If you take a look at some of the other Rishonim, Ubefrat Rabbeinu Bechaya, in the beginning of Parshas Vayikra, he has a whole different understanding of this halacha of Kol HaMenachos Bayis Matzah, and not surprisingly, he connects the idea that the Korban Mincha had to be matzah and it couldn't be chametz with the fact that Yidden on Pesach have a mitzvah saseh deiraisa be'erev teichel matzahs. They have an isser to eat chametz. They have a lois saseh of bayira bayimatzeh mitan asef and tashbiso. He says that the idea of a mincha needing to be matzah and chametz is very much related to the avodah of Pesach. And I think it's kedai to speak out this Rabbeinu Bechaya. That goes without saying. But I think that in order to properly appreciate it, we have to take a step backwards and we have to understand a little bit better. Why is it on Pesach that we eat matzah? Why is it on Pesach that we're not allowed to eat chametz? We're not even allowed to have chametz in our rishos. And I think if we understand the role that matzah and chametz plays a little bit better by Pesach, so then we'll be able to understand a little bit better the sugyas that we're learning right now in Masechtas Menachos. This is not Varfin, by the way. The name of the parak is Kol HaMenachos Bayis Matzah. Every sugya we're learning is related to this inyan. But I think in order to properly appreciate what Rabbeinu Bechaya is being megalut to us and other tzaddikim, we have to have a better understanding of the inyan of matzah and chametz. Now, if it wasn't Shlosh Yom Koydem L'Chag, we'd probably take the shorter approach of going about this, but being that it is Shloshim Yom Chaydim Chag, it's already Soif Zman. So I think Davar Be'itay Matov, I think it's kedai to take the long scenic route and just expand a little bit on the mitzvah of matzah, the isser of chametz, and then Be'ezer Hashem, not in today's share, but Be'ezer Hashem will close the loop, will come full circle, and hopefully have a better havana of the inyan of Kol HaMenachos Bayis Matzah. So, al rishon, val achron. Every Jew knows that on Pesach, at the Leil HaSeder, there's a mitzvah saseh deiraisa to eat a kazayas of matzah. Shenemar be'erev teichel matzahs. Now, the Torah says, Shivas Yom teichel matzahs. The Gemara says that really it's only the first night that there's a chayva. The rest of Yontif, it's a rishos. We've spoken many times over the years, the Vilna Gaon and the Meiser Rav, that said that really the whole Yontif, there's a chiyuv to eat matzah. The Gemara calls it rishus, relative to the first kazayis, where even if you're not hungry, you have to eat a kazayis, it's a rishus. But avada, mitzvah sometimes, klapi chayva, says the Goyin, is referred to as a rishus, but a mitzvah's kiyumas. For sure there is vadvar matikin, that's not our inyan. But for sure there's a mitzvah the first night of Pesach to eat matzah. Why is there a mitzvah to eat matzah? Why is there a mitzvah to eat matzah? And by the way, you have to know the answer to this question. Number one, mitzvah tzrichas kavana could be, and even if you mitzvah ain't tzrichas kavana, but there's a yesh oimrim that when Rabbi Gamliel said kol shalei ama shloisha dvar malalu leyatzi de chayvase bepesach ve'eluhem pesach matzah umar, he means you have to understand the tam ha-mitzvah. So why is it that we eat matzah? So I think a pretty solid answer to this question is it's mefurish in the Haggadah Shal Pesach. Matzah zu she'anu oichlen al shoma. Why do we eat matzah? Shloi hispik b'tzeikom shel aviseinu lahachmitz at shenigla aleim melech malchleim HaKadosh Baruch Hu ga'alam. It's because the Noshim Tzidkonius, as they were leaving Mitzrayim, they were preparing frishtik, they were preparing breakfast, and they were kneading their dough. And before the dough had an opportunity to rise, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was megala himself to Klal Yisrael, and at Oskalais the Yidden, Ugalam, Shenemar, it's a pasuk in the Torah. Vayoifu es habatzik, asher hoitziu mi Mitzrayim, ugais matzos. They, the Noshim Tzidkonius, baked the matzos in a state of matzos. You know why? Ki loy chametz, it didn't have a chance to rise. Ki garshu mi Mitzrayim, because they were sent out of Mitzrayim. V'lo yachlu lehismameya, they didn't have an opportunity to wait around a little bit. V'gam tzedul lo yasalem, and by the way, they didn't even have a chance to prepare any tzedul derech. They had to take everything to go, and as a result, we say in the Haggadah, matzah zu she'anu oichlen al shuma, al shum shloi hispik b'tzeikim shel aviseinu lahachmetz. It's because of this pasuk, vayoifu es habatzik asher hitziu mi Mitzrayim ugas matzahs ki lo chametz ki garshu mi Mitzrayim v'lo yachlu es mameh. And the truth is that the makar to this paragraph in the Haggadah Shal Pesach is a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah in Arvei Psachim, Mesechtes Psachim, Daf Kuf Tez Zayin Amid Beis. Truth is, this Mishnah that we quote in the Haggadah Shal Pesach, if you think about it, is a plea. There's two very, very, very basic kashas that need to be asked. When we learned Chumash in Parshas Boy, we went through them briefly. But I think Kan HaMakom Laharach. Then it was in Kan HaMakom Laharach. But now we have to be marich in it a little bit. And again, this is like the Yesoidei HaYesoides. I think it's ma'akiv in just being intelligent about one of the most basic mitzvahs in Yehadus, the mitzvah of matzah. 2 bombe kashas. I think you could stump your friend with both of these kashas. Kasha number 1. Matzah zu she'anu oichlan al shumma. It's because of the fact that when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, lo hispik b'tzeikum shel avitzeinu lahachmitz ad shenigla aleim melech malcham HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When did the Yidden leave Mitzrayim? They left Mitzrayim on Tesvav Nisan. When Tesvav Nisan? Right, they left in the morning. Das Chalta de Gula happened by Chatzos, by Makas Bechiris. We spoke a lot about that in the Chumash Shiurim. But when did they physically leave? They left in the morning of Tesvav Nisan. It's a Gemara in the first parak of Masechtes Brachas, and the Gemara says Hakol Moedim. There's no machlokes about that. Everybody agrees. When did the Yidden leave Mitzrayim? They left Tesvav Nisan. On Yud Daled Nisan, 24 hours earlier, the Yidden brought a Karban Pesach, right? They brought a Karban Pesach. They took from the dam of the Karban Pesach and they did a Zrika. Not a Zrika on a Mizbech, they didn't have a Mizbech. But they did a Zrika on the Shtei Mezuzos and on the Mashkef. And then they sat at night by Chatzos and they ate from the basar of the Karban Pesach. And they were commanded, chapter and verse, in very great detail, exactly how you should go about it. If you go through the Pesukim in Parshas Boy, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe and Aharon to go be Mitzaveh B'nai Yisrael, to go ahead and bring the Karban Pesach, he tells them clearly, Al Matzois u'meroirim yoichlu. You should go ahead and eat it in matzah, and you should eat it together with mar. That means the Yidden had a mitzvah of matzah the night before. They left Mitzrayim with no time to allow the dough to rise. So matzah zu she'anu oichlan al shoma al shem shlei hispik b'tzeikim shel avitzeinu lahachmitz ad shenigalei melech malcham HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I hear, but I still have a kasha. What about the matzahs that the Yidden ate the night before? The matzahs that the Yidden ate the night before, that matzah could not have been al shum shalei hispik b'tzeikim shel avitzeinu lahachmitz ad shenigalei melech malcham HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it didn't happen yet, right? There's no ein muktim u'mucha b'Torah here. That happened on Yud Daled, and this happened on Tezvav, or that was Tezvav at night, and this is Tezvav in the morning. So if that's the case, this can't explain why the Yidden ate matzahs the night before. Now, I don't know, if you would ask me, I would think the reason we eat matzah by the Leila Seder with the Karban Pesach and with the Mar is because that's the way the Yidden ate it in Mitzrayim. And when the Yidden ate in Mitzrayim, it had nothing to do with the fact that it was like hispik b'tzeikim shel avitzeinu lahachmitz ad shenigalei melech malcham HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is the reason we eat matzah? Again, it's a nuanced question. Matzah zu she'anu oichlin is because of the way the Yidden left Mitzrayim on Tesvav Nisan. I hear. But then why did the Yidden eat matzah the night before? And doesn't it make more sense that whatever reason the Yidden ate matzah the night before is the reason that we're eating matzah today? I think this is something that requires a little bit of beer. Here's another kasha. This kasha is even a starker kasha. And that is that Moshe told the Bnei Yisrael that you're going to have to eat matzah, and he told him you can't eat chametz. As a matter of fact, he told him tashbisu samri batechem. As a matter of fact, he told him there's a lot of lo yimatzeh samri batechem. If you look at the Psukim and Parshas Boy, you have the entire Parsha of Pesach, right? It's divided into a few groups, if you remember, we don't Chumash. But the initial chelik of it is all mentioned before they didn't leave Mitzrayim. They were told not just to eat a Karban Pesach, they were told to prava yontif of Pesach. If they were told to prava yontif of Pesach, and they were told you have to eat matzah and not let eat chametz, and they were told that there's even an Issa Bal Yematzeh, you can't have any chametz in your rishos. So if that's the case, what's going on over here? It sounds like that the Yiddinis had an opportunity to go ahead and to bake baguettes and make lafas, they would have. But the problem is, what how in the world is that possible? They were told clearly, go through the Pesukei HaTorah. There's an Issa Chametz. They were told that there's a Issa Bal Yematzeh. What in the world is going on over here? How is there ever a Havamina in the world that the Yidden were going to go ahead and they were going to make Chametz? They were bound by the lav of Bal Yematzeh. What's going on over here? Again, when you learn Chumash, and Baruch Hashem, we went through these parashas together, you can't even read the Haggadah. Again, if you don't know the Chumash, you don't know the Chumash. Beseder, I can't help you. But if you know the Chumash, it jumps off the page. This is mamash akasha from the manushtana. It's mamash what it is. It's that obvious. Both kashas are that obvious. The reason we eat matzah is because the next day they eat matzah already the night before. So why did they eat matzah then? I'd like to know. And I'm assuming that's probably the reason we eat matzah today. It sounds reasonable, right? Okay, you'll tell me now, but still, why did they eat matzah the night before? And number two, what was the havamina they were going to bake chametz? They couldn't bake chametz. They couldn't bake chametz because they were bound by the lav of chametz, which was true in Mitzrayim, just like it was going to be true. Both of these kashas are bombas. So I think we have to go through both of them. And we're going to do al achron, val rishon. The second kasha first. So again, what was the havamina that they were going to bake chametz? Weren't they bound by the Yisra Matzah? You know why I asked this kasha? The Ramban asks this kasha. Now the Ramban doesn't ask it in Toim Rav Yeshleimer. You have to read the Ramban, but the Ramban was very bothered with this kasha. The Ramban in his Pirush al Torah in Parshas Bo on the pasuk Vayoifu es habotzek asher hoitziu mi Mitzrayim. It's a short paragraph. We'll read the whole paragraph. Zok the Ramban she'afu oisei matzos. The reason that they baked matzos was mipnei mitzvah shenitztavo. Because they were commanded to make matzahs. They were told, "Sar lo yimatze bivatechem ki koloicha machmetzes v'nichrasa." Vayoifu es habotzek asher hitziu mi Mitzrayim ugois matzahs. Talk to Heilige Ramban. You want to know why they did it ugois matzahs? Because they were told this in Issa Chametz. So the reason they made matzahs for the same reason we're going to eat matzah in a couple of weeks is because the Torah said they had to eat matzah. So what does it mean? Ki loy chametz ki garshu mi Mitzrayim v'lo yachlus mameh v'gam tzedel lo yasnu lehem. Zok the Ramban v'amar ki garshu mi Mitzrayim. You know what that's coming to say? Loy masha afu oisa baderech. It's coming to explain why is it that they baked it on the road. Meaning, they should have made the matzahs in a matzah factory. They should have made the matzahs like everybody makes a matzah. So why did they do it? Mamish carrying it on their shoulders. Bavur. The answer is ki garshu mi Mitzrayim, because they were driven out of Egypt. V'lo yachlu lehisma meya, and they couldn't wait any longer. Lefois oisoi pa'ir v'loseis oisoi afui matzos v'al kein nasu oisoi batzek u'misharoisam tzrurois besim loisam al shichman The question is why? Why did they do it in that way? They should have done it in a more proper way. The answer is they didn't have an opportunity to do it in a proper way, and that's why they sort of had to bake it to go. But you want to know, Zok der Ramban, why they made matzahs? That's because of the beginning of the parasha, because they were bound by the Yisra Chametz just like we're bound by the Yisra Chametz. The second part, that's explaining why it was done in this haphazard way. But Avada, there was never a havamina that the Yidden were going to go ahead and make Chametz because they were bound be'etzem by an Yisra Chametz. In other words, according to the Ramban, when we say in the Agadah Shal Pesach, Matzah zu Shaנו Oichlan al Shum Ma, al Shum Shlei Hispik B'Tzeikev Shal Aviseinu Lahachmetz, Ad Shenigla Aleim Melech Ma'achil Amachman Kodesh Baruch Hu Galam. It's dachuk, but it's a little bit of a misnomer here. You have to say it's not so much that the Yidden were going to make chametz, but they didn't have an opportunity. Memela, they ended up with matzah. That's why you eat matzah. They were going to eat matzah regardless. What happened because they couldn't even make the matzah properly, and as a result, they had to take it to go, and they had to make it in this haphazard way. And it sounds like matzah zu Shaanu Oichlin is a zeicha for that. But again, just to be 100% clear, according to the Ramban, the reason we eat matzah is not because there wasn't an opportunity to go ahead and make chametz. The reason we eat matzah, according to the Ramban, is because of the azara. The azara of matzah predated the fact that and that pasuk of Kigosh Mitzrayim is only an explanation for why it happened the way it happened. The problem is, this Ramban's a chiddush. Specifically, if you take a look at Rashi says, Terem Yechmotz, right? They were thrown out before it had an opportunity to become chametz. Is actually a pasuk earlier. Vayisa amis b'tzeikoi terem yechmatz. Says Rashi on those words, Hamitzriyim lo hinichum lishois k'dei chimutz. The Mitzrayim did not allow the Yidden ki garshu mi Mitzrayim. They didn't have an opportunity to make it into chametz. Rashi seems to be learning kipshute, which seems to be the Mishnah, which is what we say in the Agadah Shal Pesach. It sounds like from Rashi they would have made it into chametz. And if that's the case, l'chayra hadju kushal l'tuch How could they have made it into chametz? Again, this is the second kasha we mentioned earlier. How could they have made it into chametz? How could they have made it into chametz? There was no option to make it into chametz. They were already bound by the azara, which is the Ramban's kasha already. And the Ramban says a whole pshat, but Rashi doesn't go with that pshat. So if that's the case, how were they able to do this? So if you take a look at the Ran, in Arvei Psachim, on the Mishnah on Kuf Tezayin Amud Beis, says the Ran, quote, V'lo yachlu lehisma meya. They were thrown out of Mitzrayim. They couldn't wait any longer. She'ilu yachlu lisma meya, because had they been able to wait a little bit longer, hayu machmitzen oisai. They would have allowed it to become chametz. The Pesach Mitzrayim lo nahag elo yom Laila v'yoim. K'di isa b'Pesach sheni. Zok the Ram, because Pesach Mitzrayim was only noyig for a day, a night, and a day. What does it mean, a day? It means Mishesh Shoysul L'mayla on Yudalid Nisan, and then the night of Leil Tesvav, and then the following day. What's the precedent for having a 1 day and a half type of Pesach Sheni, Ulamacher, but then day afterwards, on Tez Zayin Nisan, Hayu Mutarim b'Malacha, at that point they were allowed to do Malacha, Ubechametz, and they were allowed to eat Chametz. Ulafichach, Ilu Yachlu Lehisma Meya, had they had a little bit of more time, Hichmitzu Isaiseim L'Tzayrich Macha, they would have been Machmitz, their dough, for the next day, Shaloi Huzaru B'Bal Yirah, because even though it's true they were told they're not allowed to eat the Chametz, but they were never told that there's an Issa Bal Yirah Bal Yamatzeh, therefore they would have prepared at least for Tez Zayin, but they didn't have any opportunity, right? The pasuk says, they had no choice but to go ahead and make it matzah. So Zok Duran, regarding that second kasha, how were they able to go ahead and make it chametz? What was the havamina that we're going to make it chametz? Weren't they bound by the Issa chametz? The answer is yes, but not for 7 days. They were only bound by the Issa chametz for that 1 day, and they were also not bound by Bal Yirah Bal Yamatzeh. As a result, they were going to go ahead, they were going to make the matzah, and like this, they were going to take it to go, and they were going to have everything that they needed. So this sorts out the second kasha from the Gedolei HaRishayim without any Tosefes. The Rishayim already asked the kasha. What was the havamina they were going to make chametz? Weren't they bound by the Issa? Weren't they bound by the Issa chametz? The Ramban says yes, and Enochinami, when the pasuk says Kigarshu, it just means why they did it in such a fast, haphazard way. But Enochinami, they were never going to make chametz. It was already off the table. The Ran, and it's Mavur this way, and Rashi also held that Avada, they were making chametz, and the only reason they didn't make chametz is because they were rushed out, and they had no opportunity to go ahead and make the chametz. Weren't they bound? The answer is, they were bound for a day. It was like a Pesach Sheni Diga start Pesach. It was only for 1 day, and there was also no Issa Bal Yirah Bal Yamatzeh, so they were going to bake it, but they weren't making frishtik, right? We always thought they were making frishtik. That's not what was going on over here. It was nachmul, right? It was making dinner for the night. That's what they were making. Because the next night, Leil Tezayin, at that point they were going to be allowed to eat, and that's what's playing itself out. But now we have to address the first kasha. The first kasha is that if the reason we eat matzah is because of what we say in the Agada, well, if that's the case, why did the Yidden have a mitzvah to eat matzah already, B'Leil Tezvav? That time was first nischadish during the day of Tezvav, l'chayra, a bumba kasha. Truth is, if you take a look at the Marsha, on that Gemara, in Psach and Kuf Tezayin Amud Beis, the Marsha already asks the kasha. He asks it. He says, if the reason you're supposed to eat matzah, the Mishnah says, Al Shum Shalei Hispek B'Tzeikom, so how come B'Leil Tezvav, which was before that, the Yidden already had a mitzvah to eat matzah? Dr. Marsha, I think the reason they had a mitzvah to eat matzah was for a whole different reason. It's because the pasuk says that Moshe told Klal Yisrael, you should eat the Karban Pesach b'chipazon, right? He told them, you should be holding your stick, you should be wearing your shoes, right? Everything should be done b'chipazon. We spoke out from the Sforna, the Indian of chipazon was to show the bitachon, right? It was all about the bitachon. Because if you're going to have bitachon like this, the Yeshua is going to come. Because you can make all the achanas in the world, but if you don't have bitachon, it's not going to happen. So this was all about the bitachon, right? That was that Indian. But the bottom line is, says the Marsha, being that it had to be eaten b'chipazon, it's for that reason they were told to eat matzah. Eat matzah out the b'chipazon. But it has nothing to do with the mitzvah l'deiros of matzah. Because the mitzvah l'deiros of matzah was not neschadish yet. It was first neschadish the next day. Because matzah zu Shaנו Oichlan al Shuma al Shum Shalei Hispek B'Tzeikom Shalav Yisenu Lahachmetz. Why then did they? I don't know, why did they have to hold their stick? Why were they wearing their shoe? And you eat matzah, you're holding your stick? You're holding your shoes? No. That was something that was negeya for Pesach Mitzrayim. It was a chiddush for Pesach Mitzrayim that had to be eaten b'chipazon. Included in the mitzvah of b'chipazon is you can't sit there and wait and let the dough rise forever. So therefore, it's part and parcel of b'chipazon. Abazok de Marsha enochinami. The al matzos umeroirim yoichlu. of Pesach Mitzrayim has nothing to do, Hafeldik, with the mitzvahs Aseh Be'erev Teichel Matzahs. And the matzah Morim Yechlu of Pesach Doros, that's related to matzah Zushana Oichlan Al Shoma. The matzah that they ate in Mitzrayim, that was related to the mitzvah, it was related to the inyan of Chipazon. As I talked to Marsha. But if you take a look at some of the Rishonim, the Avudram, the Shibali Aleket, the Abarbanel brings this in his Haggadah. There's a new Madura of it called Zevach Pesach. But if you look at the Kadmoinim, they all say more Pashit. They say Avada, the reason there was a mitzvah to eat the original Karban Pesach was Al Shum it didn't happen yet chronologically. It's true it didn't happen yet chronologically. But the Eibush there's a idea asidos, and the Eibush knew exactly how it was going to play itself out, and that ultimately there was going to be al shaloi hispik b'teikim shalav yiseinu lahachmitz, and that was going to be kavei on mitzvah l'dairos. So the way Pesach was going to play itself out for future generations was with a mitzvah to eat matzah. So it's for that reason David already gave Klal Yisrael a mitzvah to go out and eat matzah. But at that point it was like a chayk. It was a mitzvah v'loy tam, because the tam wasn't even in the bria yet. The tam was something that was first going to be in the Skadish later. But al kapanim again, two klora terutzim from the kadmoinim to the erste bombe kasha, and that is that if the reason we eat matzah is al shub shaloi hishbik b'tzeikam, so why the first night? The night before, how come they had a chiyuv matzah? Two mahalchim. The Marsha says it's for a different reason. That was related to the inyan of chipazon. There was a lot of dinim that were related to chipazon. That was one of them, and enochinami. It had nothing to do with the reason we eat matzah today. And when we eat matzah today, it's not a zeicha for that. It's a zeicha for the fact that the second mahalach is v'shteit in the Avudram and the Shibali Aleket and the Abarbanel. It's that the reason they ate matzah the night before was taka for this reason. It's taka for this reason, and it was somehow a mitzvah that was given, even though the tam at the time had not been given. It was al shem ma'asid, because at some point the reason was going to be in this gala. Now, when we asked the kasha, we asked it like in a nuanced way, right? We said that if the reason we have a chiyuv to eat matzah is, so why they have a chiyuv to eat it the night before? We just added a knech. They obviously had a chiyuv to eat the night before, so wouldn't it make more sense that the reason we have a chiyuv to eat matzah is because of whatever the reason is for the night before? So like Davujam, the Shabali Alek, and Dabar Benel, it's all the same reason. Snack kasha is fashetzich not a kasha, and like the Marsha, it's also not a kasha, because just like the inyonei chipazon are not negei l'dairis, so that was a special zach for that night. That was related to chipazon. This has nothing to do with l'dairis. But just to end with maybe one oimik in what the Avudram and the Shibali Aleket and the Abar Benel are saying. Right? They're saying a grace zach. They gave us a mitzvah of matzah, which at the time made no sense. But it was all because at some point in the future, it was somehow going to make sense, right? If you think about it, just from a philosophical perspective, it's a fascinating idea. But I think a very, very obvious zushtal to this is the Beis Halevi in Parshas Bo. Now, it's a long Beis Halevi, which we're not going to go through. Even if we had time, we wouldn't go through, because it's beyond the scope of what we do. But just one chelek, one yisoid, v'shteit in the Beis Halevi. And that is, we say in Parshas Bo, v'igadu televincha bayom ahulemer. Everyone knows this pasuk. This is the makar to the mitzvah. So Sipri Yitzias Mitzrayim. Ba'avurze osa Hashem li b'tzeisi mi Mitzrayim. Next pasuk. V'hayu l'cha lo'isa yadcha u'lezikarim b'nei nechel ma'antiyah Torah Hashem b'fichi b'el chazok yisayach Hashem mi Mitzrayim, the mitzvah of tefillin. And then finally, v'shamarta es achuka hazois l'moyada miyamim yamima. These three psukim, v'igad v'levincha b'yema hu leimar, is the way the Yid is supposed to be makayim the mitzvah of Sipri Yitzias Mitzrayim to the Rasha. So we know Kineged Arba Banim Dibra Torah. And there's 4 different times the Torah says the mitzvah Sipi Yitzias Mitzrayim, and in Haggadah we say it's because there's 4 types of children. There's the Chacham, the Rasha, there's the Tam, and there's the Inya Dei Elisha. These psukim, V'igadu Televincha B'yema Hu Leimar, Ba'avruzeh Asa Hashem Li B'tzeisim Mitzrayim, is talking to the Ben Rasha. How do we know that? Rashi says it. Ramas tshuva leben Rasha. Loimar asa Hashem li v'loy l'cha she'ilu hayisa sham loy hayisa kedai legal, and we say it in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. So this is the tshuva to the Ben Rasha. So the Beis Halevi in his piece, it's Dibra Maskal v'Igadu Televincha. It's a few pages long. So he's this going through why this is the tshuva to the Ben Rasha, and he tries to understand a little bit better what the Rasha Shaila even is. Ayin Sham, again, way beyond the scope of what we're doing. But the Beis Halevi comes out and he says that the question of the Rasha, in his opinion, is the Rasha came to the Seder. And he came to the Seder when there was a Korban Pesach. And he looked around and he saw the Yidden were bringing the Korban Pesach. He said, why bring the Korban Pesach? So his father told him, what do you mean? Don't you know we were once slaves in Mitzrayim? And the Mitzrayim, they worshipped the Tleh. And as a result, we were told, Mishchu yetchem me'avodah zarah, k'chulechem tzayin shel mitzvah. And he went to the Rambam and the Meira and he explained to him the whole inyan of how by us going and us bringing a Korban Pesach, we're distancing ourselves so much, so incredibly far from the avodah zarah of the Egyptians. This Rasha, who's not a fool, he's a Rasha, he turned to his father and he says, Tata Leben, I understand why 3,300 years ago this made sense. The Jews, they left Mitzrayim. They were steeped in the culture of the Egyptians. They had avodah zarah inside of them. They needed to do something to go ahead and distance themselves and be mirachik themselves from avodah zarah. He says, but now we live in a world where what's avodah zarah? When avodah zarah? The Anshe Knesset Agdola were already mevatel the yitzra avodah zarah. Where most people in the world believe in monotheism, they believe in one God. He said, today it makes absolutely no sense. If you want to celebrate Yetzias Mitzrayim today, do it in a way that makes sense. Do it in a way that we can relate to. What are you going to go? You're going to slaughter a lamb and be blood spritzing all over the place? Why? Because you're trying to be mirachik yourself from avodah zarah? It has no pshat. It has no havana. Said the Beis Halevi, that's the time. I ain't sure how he fits this into the psukim. That's brilliant. Kedarke Bakoitish. He says that was going on. And then the Derech Agav says there's a big ruach in the world right now of maskilim. And people, they want to go ahead and they want to say that maybe this mitzvah is not so important and that mitzvah is not so important. He said it's the geist of the world today. There's minim and apikarsim and koifrim that are going and they're suggesting that, I can understand celebrating the Yontiv of Pesach, but you're doing it in such an archaic way. Do it in a way where it makes more sense. Zok Beis Halevi, I'm skipping all the way to the punchline. V'higada to Levintcha, to that Ben, that Rasha Ma'oimer, you should go to him and you should tell him, Bavur zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeisim Mitzrayim. You should tell him, mein Tayr is in. You tell him with chiba and ahava. You tell him you don't understand. You're a little bit misguided. You see, you think that the way Tamei HaMitzvahs works is that because something happened, it's for that reason we were given a certain mitzvah. It's actually just the opposite. The Torah came before the world, which means that the mitzvah predated the events and the happenstances that are the quote-unquote Tam HaMitzvah. As a matter of fact, says the Beis Halevi, you want to know how this really works? It's because of the mitzvah that we have the tam of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is not a toitzah of the tam. The tam, says the Beis Halevi, is a toitzah of the mitzvah. We tell the Rasha, says the Beis Halevi, Bavur zeh, you point to the Pesach, you point to the matzah, you point to the maror. It's because of this that Asa Hashem li b'tzeisim in Mitzrayim. We don't do this because we left Mitzrayim. It's because of this that we left Mitzrayim. The mitzvah is not a toitzah of the tam. The tam is a taitzah of the mitzvah. Let me read it inside. This zeu de meishav laharasha al chakiroisav v'igada televincha bayemu hulemu bavur zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeisim in Mitzrayim lo yama lo bavur sheyotzasim in Mitzrayim ani oisa ha-mitzvah rak lehepoch bavur mitzvahs elu nischadish lanu yetzias Mitzrayim v'zeu bichlal b'chol tamei ha-mitzvahs deloi b'shvil hatam nasa ha-mitzvah rak lehepoch the bavur ha-mitzvah ba hatam. It's punkt verkehr. It's mamish just the opposite. The reason we have the mitzvah is not because of the time. We have the mitzvah koydem brias olam. The avos hakdoshim kept kol haTorah kulo. Says the Beis Halevi. That means that Avram Avinu brought a Korban Pesach on Yudal. So you tell me he did it because of Mishchu Yetchem Me'avodah Zarah? It didn't make any sense. He was never a slave in Mitzrayim. There was no Klal Yisrael yet to be slaves in Mitzrayim. The teretz is the mitzvah is the mitzvah is the mitzvah. The mitzvahs have taimim that are gluyim. They have taimim nistorim. There's Kabbalah. There's the oimek, there's layers and layers and layers in terms of why we do mitzvahs that we do. There's a tam nigla, and the tam nigla is something that's mentioned in the Torah. But don't confuse the whole chefza and existence of the mitzvah based on that tam. As a matter of fact, it's actually just the opposite. This mitzvah was here. This mitzvah is one of the yisoidus, is the foundation of the whole world. Because it's takal ba'iraisa ubara alma. It just so happens that there's a oilon kim and hagay hoylech, and fakir, what the Eibishter did was, he matched the tamei mitzvahs to the actual mitzvah, working in the reverse, working the other way around. This is the tshuva that you're supposed to tell the Rasha. Again, you tell him you're misguided. I understand what you're saying. You're not saying so terrible, but you're missing the whole point. If you believe, and if your impression is that the mitzvah is a toitzah of the tam, so now there's makim to have an intellectual conversation. What you need to do is you need to tell him. Haki Yashinav. I said you tell him nicely. Don't say Haki Yashinav, but whatever. But either way, Babur is Hashem li b'tzeisi mi Mitzrayim. You have to explain to him that the b'tzeisi mi Mitzrayim was Babur zeh. It's not the other way around. And when you understand that, then of course this whole kasha of the Ben Rasha doesn't even start. This whole kasha that he has is not even a havamina, because it's the other way around. The tam is not the siba for the mitzvah. The mitzvah in the reverse is the siba for the tam. What's the first mitzvah that we do? At the Leila Seder, we eat matzah. We sit down and we eat matzah. When Klal Yisrael ate matzah that first night, when they ate it, there was no time, right? There was no reason for them to eat matzah. But the time was nispara later. It was something that was niskala afterwards. You know what you see from there? You mamish see this oimik. The time is not the siba for the mitzvah. The mitzvah is the siba for the time. It's because they were told, al matzah sumirayim yoichlu. It was because they got that mitzvah. That's why it was like hispik b'tzei. If this is the siba for the matzah, it would make no sense why you're eating matzah the night before. But the reason it makes sense is because the tam is not the siba of the mitzvah. Fakir, the mitzvah is what begets the tam. And to bring out that point on this night, the night of Emunah, the night of Igada Televincha, the night where we have to inculcate in our neshamas what Yiddishkeit's all about, we have to understand this very basic yisoid, that the tam is not the siba for the mitzvah. Rak lahepech, it's the mitzvah that's guiding the tam. And what could bring this out better than the way the Avodram, the Shibali Aleket, and the Abar Benel said is the pshat in Be'erev Teichel Matzah, why we eat the matzah on Leil Tezvav, even though the tam didn't happen until later. This is the biggest, this is part of the Bavur Zeh. This is it. Look, why are we eating matzah? Read the Torah. The Torah says, Al Shum, what do you mean it happened the night before? The Torah is teaching us this Yisoid on this night. I think this is the oimik of what the Beis Halevi is saying. This is the oimik in the Abar Benel and the Shibali Aleket and the Avod Ram, and we are going to stop this first or second, I don't know how many rate bites this was, Shir over here, Be'ez Hashem, more to come.